Hello, story lovers! Tonight, we're diving into a tale of passion, secrets, and choices that could change everything. Hearts will be broken, love will be tested, and every twist will leave you on the edge of your seat. Comment below where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, hit like, subscribe, share it with someone who loves a powerful love story, and tap the bell so you never miss the next thrilling chapter. Ready? Let's begin. The morning Manhattan air bit sharp against Victoria Stone's skin as she stood before the towering glass monument that was Cross Industries. 47 floors of steel and ambition pierced the gray December sky, each window reflecting the cold light of a city that never forgave weakness. Her fingers trembled as she adjusted her blazer, not from the cold, but from the weight of desperation pressing against her chest. At 28, Victoria had learned that life didn't hand out second chances. Her mother's cancer had returned with a vengeance, and the medical bills were drowning her family in debt that felt deeper than the Hudson River. This job, this impossibly high-paying position as personal assistant to the most enigmatic billionaire in New York, was her lifeline. The elevator's ascent to the 40th floor felt like a journey to another world. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic rainbows across marble floors that probably cost more than her apartment's yearly rent. Floor-to ceiling windows framed Manhattan like a living painting, all sharp edges and glittering ambition. "You must be Victoria," the voice belonged to Grace Martinez, a woman whose silver hair spoke of decades navigating corporate waters. Her smile held warmth, but her eyes carried a warning that made Victoria's stomach clench. "Welcome to Cross Industries. I hope you're prepared for what comes next." Victoria straightened her shoulders. "I'm ready for anything." Grace's laugh held no humor. "That's what they all say. Listen carefully, because I'm only going to explain this once. Mr. Cross has very specific rules, but there's one that matters more than all the others combined." The older woman's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Never touch him. Not a handshake. Not an accidental brush of fingers. Nothing. No woman in this building has had physical contact with Damien Cross in 15 years. Those who tried were escorted out by security before they could blink." Victoria felt her eyebrows climb toward her hairline. "That's oddly specific. It's not negotiable. It's survival." Before Victoria could process the strangeness of the warning, the intercom crackled to life. A voice like aged whiskey and winter storms filled the reception area. "Send her in." Victoria's pulse hammered against her throat as she approached the frosted glass doors. Whatever waited for her beyond that threshold, she would face it. Her family's future depended on it. The office beyond was a study in controlled perfection. Mahogany and leather, steel and glass, everything arranged with mathematical precision. But it was the man behind the desk who stole the breath from her lungs. Damien Cross looked like he'd been carved from marble by an artist who understood both beauty and cruelty. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on magazine covers, piercing blue eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul, and a jaw sharp enough to cut glass. His charcoal suit fit like it had been made for his body alone, which it probably had. But there was something arctic about him. Something that made the spacious office feel like standing in a winter storm despite the warmth radiating from hidden vents. "Victoria Stone, I assume?" His voice held no warmth, no welcome. He didn't look up from the multiple monitors displaying financial data that probably represented more money than most people saw in a lifetime. "Yes, sir. Thank you for this opportunity." When he finally raised his eyes to study her, Victoria felt the full weight of his attention like a physical force. His gaze swept over her professional attire, her carefully styled auburn hair, her determined green eyes. For just a moment, something flickered across his expression before vanishing behind walls of ice. "Your credentials are adequate. Grace will explain your duties. I expect perfection, punctuality, and absolute discretion." "Questions?" Victoria bit back her first response, which would have involved commentary about his charming bedside manner. Instead, she asked, "What are your expectations regarding communication style and reporting frequency?" Something that might have been approval ghosted across his features. "Direct and efficient." Daily summaries by 5 p.m. Emergency matters immediately. Understood. Perfectly. As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her at the door. Miss Stone, don't disappoint me. I don't give third chances. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like the ceiling of a tomb. In the hallway, Grace waited with knowing eyes. Well, what do you think of our Mr. Cross? Victoria stared back at the frosted glass, her heart still racing from an encounter that had lasted less than 5 minutes. I think he's the most dangerous man I've ever met. Good, Grace said, her smile sharp as winter wind. That means you might actually survive working for him, 20 minutes into her first day. Victoria felt like she was drowning in a sea of schedules, financial documents, and impossible demands. Damien's calendar looked like a mathematical equation, with meetings scheduled down to the minute and phone calls that move millions of dollars. With single sentences, she was reorganizing. His afternoon appointments when her desk phone rang with the shrill urgency of an emergency. He needs coffee, Grace's voice carried a stress that made Victoria's stomach drop. Black, no sugar. Temperature precisely 160 degrees. Victoria blinked at the phone. I'm sorry, did you say 160 degrees exactly? The thermometer is in the supply closet. Trust me, Victoria. Just do exactly as I said. The break room felt like foreign territory as Victoria carefully prepared the coffee according to specifications that bordered on the absurd. She found the digital thermometer where Grace had promised, checked the temperature twice, and balanced the cup with the care of someone carrying nitroglycerin. When she knocked on Damien's door, she found him engaged in what appeared to be a high-stakes video call with Japanese investors. His voice carried the cold authority of someone who had never heard the word no in any language that mattered. He gestured impatiently for the coffee. Without breaking his conversation about market, projections, and technological innovations that would reshape entire industries, Victoria approached his desk, focusing every ounce of attention on not spilling the perfectly heated beverage. As she set the cup down, Damien reached for it at the same moment. Their fingers brushed. For less than a heartbeat, the reaction was immediate and electric, like touching a live wire in a rainstorm. Damien jerked his hand back as if he'd been burned, his blue eyes widening in shock that transformed his entire face. The coffee cup tumbled from nerveless fingers, sending hot liquid cascading across his pristine desk and expensive documents. End call. His voice cut through the confused protests of the investors like a blade. Reschedule for tomorrow. The screen went dark, leaving them in silence that felt heavy as storm clouds. Damien stood abruptly, staring at Victoria with an expression that mixed horror, confusion, and something else that made her pulse skip. You touched me. The words came out barely above a whisper. Like he was confessing to a crime, Victoria grabbed tissues from his desk drawer, frantically trying to salvage the coffee-soaked documents. I'm so sorry. It was completely accidental. Let me fix this. Stop. The command in his voice made her freeze mid-motion. She looked up to find him backing away from his desk, his face pale and his hands visibly trembling. For a moment, the powerful billionaire who commanded boardrooms and bent markets to his will looked almost vulnerable. Mr. Cross, I truly apologize. It won't happen again. But Damien wasn't listening. He was staring at his hand where their skin had briefly connected, as if trying to solve an equation that defied all logic. In 15 years, no woman's touch had affected him this way. Usually any physical contact made him feel sick, anxious, desperate to escape his own skin. But Victoria's touch had felt warm, comforting, electric. This couldn't be happening. Get out. The words came quietly, but they hit like physical blows. Victoria felt her heart plummet into her shoes. On her first day, she had managed to violate his most sacred rule and probably destroyed the job her family desperately needed. Sir, please let me explain. Out. Now. She gathered the soggy documents with hands that shook only slightly. I'll retype these reports and have them ready within the hour. Damien finally looked at her directly. and Victoria was surprised to see confusion rather than anger burning in his eyes. "Why aren't you afraid of me?" The question caught her completely off guard. Should I be? Everyone else is. Victoria studied his face, seeing something broken beneath the cold exterior. Something that reminded her of her own reflection during the darkest moments of her mother's illness. Maybe that's their problem, not yours. For a long moment, they stared at each other across the coffee-stained desk. Something passed between them, an understanding that neither could fully name, but both could feel like electricity. In the air before a storm, "Go." His voice had lost its harsh edge, replaced by something that sounded almost like pleading. Victoria nodded and backed toward the door. As her hand touched the handle, she turned back once more. "For what it's worth, Mr. Cross, I don't think you're as dangerous as you want people to believe." The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Damien alone with the scent of spilled coffee and the lingering warmth where her fingers had touched his dot in the hallway. Grace waited with knowing eyes and a sympathetic smile that held secrets. "What happened in there?" Grace asked, though her expression suggested she already suspected. Victoria looked back at the frosted glass door, her heart still racing from an encounter that had changed something fundamental in both their worlds. "I think I just broke something that was never supposed to be." Fixed. 3 weeks passed like walking on glass. Every morning, Victoria arrived at Cross Industries with the same careful precision, delivered reports with clinical efficiency, and maintained the exact distance Grace had taught her. Damien treated her like she was radioactive, speaking only in clipped sentences and never meeting her eyes for more than a heartbeat. But something had shifted in the air between them, like the charge before lightning strikes twice. Victoria noticed things others missed. How his jaw clenched when certain business partners called, the way his fingers drummed against his desk when reviewing quarterly reports from the pharmaceutical division, the shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and demons that haunted the dark hours. She had retyped the coffee-stained documents that first day, but she'd read them first. The numbers told a story that made her accounting degree suddenly feel relevant in ways she'd never expected. It was a Thursday evening when everything changed again. Victoria was organizing files in the reception area when she heard shouting from behind the frosted glass doors. Male voices, angry and demanding. She recognized one as Marcus Reed, Cross Industries' largest investor, and a man whose handshake felt like being touched by something cold and predatory. "The FDA approval is taking too long, Cross. My people are getting impatient. The drug trials need more time." Damien's voice carried steel, but Victoria caught something else underneath. Something that sounded like desperation. "We can't rush this to market." "Like hell we can't. Do you have any idea how much money is tied up in this project? How many powerful people are expecting returns? People will die if we release an untested drug, Marcus. People die every day. At least this way we profit from it." The words hit Victoria like ice water. She pressed closer to the door, her heart hammering as the pieces of a horrifying puzzle began sliding into place. "I won't be part of this." Damien's voice was quiet now, deadly quiet. "Find another CEO." Marcus's laugh was like breaking glass. "You forget, Cross. We own you. Every stock option, every board seat, every dollar that built this empire. You think you can just walk away? Watch me. I don't think you understand the position you're in. See? We know about your little problem. 15 years of therapy, isolation, the inability to be touched without falling apart. What do you think the board would say if they knew their fearless leader was just a broken little boy who can't handle human contact?" The silence that followed was so complete that Victoria could hear her own pulse in her ears. "1 week, Cross. You have 1 week to get FDA approval, or we'll make sure everyone knows exactly how damaged you really are. Your company, your reputation, your carefully constructed life, gone." The door burst open. Marcus Reed strode out with 2 men in expensive suits, flanking him like wolves. He paused when he saw Victoria at her desk, his eyes narrowing with predatory interest. Well, the new assistant. His gaze crawled over her like something unclean. "Careful, sweetheart. Your boss has a tendency to break his toys." After they left, Victoria sat frozen at her desk. The pieces were falling into place now, painting a picture that made her stomach turn. Cross Industries wasn't just a tech company. The pharmaceutical division was developing drugs that were being rushed to market for profit, regardless of safety. And Damien was caught in the middle, trapped by investors who held his secrets like weapons. The intercom crackled. "Miss Stone, my office." She found Damien standing at his floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the city lights like they held answers he couldn't find. He looked older somehow, as if the conversation with Marcus had aged him years and minutes. "How much did you hear?" His voice was flat, emotionless. "Enough." He turned to face her. Victoria saw something in his eyes that made her chest tight. Fear, real. Genuine fear from a man who had never shown weakness to anyone. "Then you know what kind of man I really am. What kind of company this really is." Victoria stepped closer, close enough to see the exhaustion etched in every line of his face. "I know you're trying to stop something terrible from happening. I know Marcus Reed and his people are holding something over you. And I know you're not the villain in this story. You don't understand." His voice cracked slightly. "The pharmaceutical division has a drug that could help millions of people with heart disease. But the trials aren't complete. The side effects could be fatal. And they want me to push it through anyway because too much money is at stake. So don't. They'll destroy me. They'll take everything I've built and burn it to the ground." Victoria moved closer still, close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with coffee and something that was uniquely him. "Maybe some things are worth burning for." Damien's eyes searched her face like he was trying to memorize every detail. "Why do you care?" "You barely know me, because I've seen who you really are when you think no one is looking. Because you're trying to do the right thing, even when it costs you everything. And because—" She took a breath that felt like jumping off a cliff. "Because I'm falling in love with the man behind all that ice." The words hung in, the air between them like a confession and a challenge all at once. Damien's face went through a dozen emotions in as many seconds before, settling on something that looked like wonder and terror combined. Victoria. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a warning. "You have no idea what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." She reached toward him, stopping just inches from his face. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" For a moment that lasted forever, they stood on the knife's edge of something that would change both their worlds. Then Damien's phone rang, shattering the moment like glass. He glanced at the screen and his face went white. "It's my investigator. The one I hired to look into Marcus Reed's operation." He answered on speaker, his voice steady, despite the tremor in his hands. "What did you find, Jackson?" "Mr. Cross, you need to get somewhere safe. Now. Marcus Reed isn't just your investor. He's part of something much bigger and much more dangerous. And sir, there's something else. Someone's been watching Miss Stone, following her home, tracking her movements. They know she's important to you." Victoria felt the world tilt sideways as Damien's eyes met hers across the desk, wide with a fear that had nothing to do with business deals and everything to do with the woman standing 3 feet away from him. "How long?" Damien's voice was barely controlled. "Since her second week, sir. They're planning something. You both need to disappear. Tonight?" The safe house was a penthouse apartment in Brooklyn that Damien kept under a false name. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Manhattan skyline. Tonight, the glittering lights felt like the eyes of predators watching from the dark. Victoria paced the living room while Damien worked his phone, calling in favors and moving money through accounts that didn't officially exist. 3 days they'd been here. 3 days of living like fugitives while Jackson gathered evidence that Marcus Reed's operation reached deeper into the government and pharmaceutical industry than either of them had imagined. "We can't hide forever." Victoria's voice cut through the silence between phone calls. "My mother's treatment starts next week. If I'm not there, ... she'll die." Damien finished the sentence she couldn't. He set down his phone and looked at her with eyes that held more pain than any billionaire should carry. "I know. Then what's the plan?" "We can't bring down Marcus Reed from a safe house." Damien moved to the windows, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. "There is a way. But it would require me to do something I swore I'd never do again, which is Trust someone completely. The words hung heavy in the air between them. Victoria moved closer, close enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched into fists at his sides. What happened 15 years ago, Damien? What made you so afraid of being touched? For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then his reflection in the window began to speak, as if he couldn't bear to face her while telling the truth. Her name was Elena Rodriguez. I was 20, heir to nothing but debt and a dying company my father had built on lies. She was everything I'd never had. Warm, genuine, unafraid of the darkness that lived inside me. His voice grew quieter, more distant. I loved her the way drowning men love air, completely, desperately. I would have given her everything, done anything she asked. Victoria's chest tightened with the jealousy she had no right to feel. What happened? She was working for my father's competitors. Everything, every moment we shared, every time she touched me, every word of love she whispered in the dark. It was all a lie designed to destroy me. The reflection in the window showed a face carved from stone. But Victoria could see the cracks running through the foundation. The night I found out, she was in my bed, telling me about the future we'd build together. I had the engagement ring in my jacket pocket. I was going to propose that very evening. His laugh was bitter as winter wind. Instead, I listened to her on the phone with her handler, laughing about how easy it had been to seduce the pathetic son of a failed businessman. Victoria felt something break inside her chest. Damien, she'd recorded everything. Every vulnerable moment, every secret I'd shared in bed, every weakness she could exploit. When I confronted her, she looked me in the eyes and told me that touching me had been the most disgusting part of her job. Now Victoria understood. The rule about no physical contact, the walls he'd built around himself, the ice that protected him from ever being hurt that way again. After that, I couldn't bear to be touched. The sight of a woman's hand reaching for me made me physically sick. I built Cross Industries into what it is today. I built it alone, safe, untouchable. Victoria moved closer to his reflection in the glass. Until me. Until you. He finally turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her heart stop. Which is why I need you to know the truth before we do this. Before I trust you with everything I am and everything I own. What truth? I've been lying to you since the moment you walked into my office. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Victoria felt her pulse hammer against her throat as every instinct screamed danger. What do you mean? Damien reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick folder. He set it on the coffee table between them, and Victoria saw her own photograph clipped to the front page. Your hiring wasn't random? I've been watching you for months. Your mother's medical bills, your family's financial situation, your desperation. I orchestrated all of it. Victoria's legs felt weak. She sank onto the couch, staring at the folder like it was a weapon pointed at her heart. I don't understand. Marcus Reed has been looking for leverage against me for years. Someone I cared about. Someone he could use as a weapon. So I decided to choose my own weakness. His voice was clinical now, emotionless. I researched dozens of women, found someone desperate enough to take any job, smart enough to be useful, attractive enough to play the part convincingly. Each word felt like a physical blow. The part of what? The woman I fell in love with? The vulnerability Marcus needed to see in order to believe he could manipulate me. Victoria's vision blurred. So everything, every moment between us, every word you said about caring for me, it was all a lie. Yes, the single word destroyed something inside her that she hadn't even known existed until now. She stood on shaking legs, backing away from him, as if he were something poisonous. And my mother's treatment? The job that pays enough to save her life? All part of the plan. I needed you invested. I needed your desperation to keep you loyal long enough for this moment. This moment. Damien's face was carved from ice again, showing nothing of the man who had stood at the window, sharing his deepest pain just minutes before. The moment when you realize that trusting me will save both our lives, and refusing to help me will destroy everything you care about. Victoria felt something die inside her chest. Something that had been growing like a flower in winter's sun. You bastard. You complete bastard? Yes, he moved closer, predator smooth and dangerous. But I'm a bastard who can save your mother's life and destroy Marcus Reed in the process. The question is whether you hate me enough to let everyone we both care about die just to watch me burn. Victoria stared at him through tears that felt like acid on her cheeks. The man she'd been falling in love with was gone, placed by the Ice King who had built an empire on other people's desperation. But beneath her heartbreak, a different emotion was growing. Cold, calculating, angry. What exactly do you need me to do? Damien's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. I need you to break my heart in front of Marcus Reed. Convince him that you've discovered the truth about why I hired you. Make him believe that you want revenge against the man who used you. And then you help me destroy him from the inside. He paused, studying her face like she was a puzzle he was still trying to solve. The question is, Victoria Stone, are you actress enough to convince him that your hatred for me is real? Victoria looked at the man who had just shattered every illusion she'd built around him, felt her own heart crystallize into something cold and sharp and utterly unforgiving. I don't think acting will be necessary. The meeting was set for midnight at Marcus Reed's private club. The kind of place where power was traded like currency and souls were bought with vintage wine and unspoken promises. Victoria sat across from Marcus, in a leather booth that probably cost more than her mother's house, wearing a black dress that Damien had chosen for its ability to distract men from rational thought. Her hands were steady as she lifted her wine glass, but inside, her heart was hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. So tell me, Miss Stone, Marcus purred, his eyes following the line of her throat as she swallowed. What changed your mind about your beloved boss? Victoria let her face crumple into an expression of betrayed pain that wasn't entirely acting. He used me. Everything he said, everything he made me feel, it was all a lie, designed to make me fall in love with him. And now I want to watch him burn. Marcus leaned back in his booth, studying her with predatory satisfaction. What are you proposing? I know Damien better than anyone. His weaknesses, his fears, his secrets. I can get you inside his head in ways you never could through intimidation alone. In exchange for my mother's medical treatments are covered for life, and I want to be there when you destroy him. I want to see his face when he realizes that the woman he thought he controlled has become his worst nightmare. Marcus's smile was sharp as a blade. I think we can arrange that. But first, I need proof of your commitment. He slid a small device across the table. Victoria recognized it as a recording device, kind intelligence agencies used for surveillance. Damien Cross will do anything to protect you now. He's made that very clear through his recent behavior. So I need you to get him to confess something that will destroy him forever. Victoria's blood turned to ice. What kind of confession? The pharmaceutical trials. I know he's been doctoring the results, hiding the side effects to protect his conscience while still pushing the drug toward approval. I need him to admit it on record. The lie came so smoothly that Victoria almost believed it herself. Marcus had twisted the truth inside out, making Damien's heroic attempts to stop a dangerous drug sound like corruption instead of conscience. He'll never admit that to me. He doesn't trust anyone enough to confess something that damaging. He'll confess to the woman whose mother is dying because he can't release a drug that might save her life. The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. Marcus had done his homework. He knew about her mother's heart condition, knew that the very drug Damien was trying to stop might be the only thing that could save the woman Victoria loved most in the world. You want me to use my mother's death as leverage against him? Want you to use whatever it takes? Marcus leaned across the table, close enough that she could smell expensive cologne, and something underneath that reminded her of things that died in dark places. Because if you can't deliver Damien Cross's confession by tomorrow night, I'll make sure your mother never receives another dose of medication as long as she lives. Victoria felt the trap closing around her like steel jaws. She was caught between two impossible choices: betray the man she loved to save her mother, or watch her mother die to protect a man who had already admitted to using her like a chess piece. I'll get you the confession. Marcus's smile was triumphant. I knew you were a smart girl. 24 hours later, Victoria stood in Damien's office as the sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky the color of blood and endings. The recording device felt like a weight in her purse. A small piece of metal that could destroy 2 lives with the press of a button. You look like someone died. Damien didn't look up from his computer screens. The meeting with Reed didn't go well. It went exactly as planned. Victoria moved closer to his desk, her heels clicking against marble like a countdown to destruction. He believed every word I said about hating you. Good. But something in his voice suggested it wasn't good at all. What does he want? A confession. About the pharmaceutical trials, about you hiding side effects while pushing the drug toward approval. Damien's hands stilled on his keyboard. He wants me to confess to something I'm not doing, I know. Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper. But he's threatening to cut off my mother's medication if I don't deliver. And Damien, that drug, the one you're trying to stop, it's the only treatment that might save her life. For the first time in days, Damien looked directly at her. His eyes held pain that seemed bottomless. So you want me to confess to corruption I'm not guilty of in order to save the woman who raised you? I want you to tell me the truth. Victoria's voice cracked. All of it. Not the version you told me to manipulate Marcus, not the lies you used to manipulate me. The real truth about who you are and what you've done. Damien stood slowly, moving to the windows that had become his confessional. The truth is that I hired you because I was lonely. The truth is that I've been fighting Marcus Reed and his people for 2 years, trying to stop them from releasing drugs that will kill people for profit. The truth is that every word I said about my past, about Alina, about what you mean to me, was real. Victoria felt tears burning behind her eyes. And the truth about the pharmaceutical trials? The truth is that I've been sabotaging them from the inside. Delaying approvals, hiding data, doing everything. I can too stop a drug that could save thousands of people from reaching the market because it could also kill thousands more. His reflection in the glass looked like a man carrying the weight of impossible choices. Including your mother. The recording device in Victoria's purse felt like it was burning against her skin. She had the confession Marcus wanted, but it was the opposite of what he'd claimed. Damien wasn't hiding corruption. He was sacrificing everything to prevent it. There's something else you need to know. Damien's voice was quiet as falling snow. I've been moving money out of the company accounts, not to hidden offshore banks, but to a fund that will pay for your mother's treatment regardless of what happens to me. Victoria's world tilted sideways. What? If I go down? If Marcus Reed destroys me and takes the company? Yeah, your mother will still receive the best medical care money can buy. For the rest of her life? But the pharmaceutical division, the drug that could save her, there are other treatments. Experimental ones that won't kill her along with the disease. I've been funding research into alternatives, using every resource I have. He finally turned to face her. I won't save one life by sacrificing thousands of others. Not even a life that matters to the woman I love. The words hung in the air between them like a bridge across an impossible divide. Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out the recording device, holding it up so Damien could see it clearly. I've been recording this conversation. Damien's face went white, but he didn't move. I know. You knew? I've known since you walked into the club last night. Jackson has been monitoring Reed's communications. We heard every word of your conversation. Victoria stared at him in confusion that felt like drowning. Then why did you tell me the truth? Why did you confess to crimes that could destroy you? Damien moved closer. Close enough that she could see her own reflection in his eyes. Because you deserved to know who you were choosing. The real man. Not the version I constructed to survive in a world that eats people like us alive. And if I give this recording to Marcus Reed, then you save your mother and destroy the man who used your desperation against you. It's what anyone in your position should do. Victoria looked down at the small device in her hands. One button press would save her mother's life and condemn the man she'd fallen in love with to destruction. Another choice would save Damien and let her mother die knowing that her daughter had chosen a stranger over the woman who had raised
her.
But there was a third option. One that would cost her everything but might save them all. Victoria raised the recording device above her head and brought it down hard against the marble floor. It shattered into pieces with a sound like breaking glass. "What did you just do?" Damien's voice was hollow with shock. "I chose you." Victoria stepped over the broken pieces toward the man who had shown her what love looked like when it was strong enough to sacrifice everything. "Not because I forgive you for lying to me, and not because I trust you completely, but because you just proved that you're willing to lose everything rather than let innocent people die." Damien reached for her, then stopped himself, his hands hovering inches from her face. "Victoria, your mother will understand." Victoria closed the distance between them, placing her palms against his chest where she could feel his heart hammering against his ribs. "Because she raised me to believe that some things matter more than our own survival." For a moment that lasted forever, they stood in the ruins of their carefully constructed lies, seeing each other clearly for the first time. Then Damien's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted to something Victoria had never seen before. Hope mixed with terror, like a man seeing salvation and damnation walking hand in hand. "It's Jackson," he answered on speaker. "Tell me you have good news." "Better than good, sir. Marcus Reed made a mistake. He's been using the club's communication systems to coordinate with his international partners. We have recordings of him bribing FDA officials, threatening competitors, and ordering the assassination of a whistleblower in Germany." Victoria felt her knees go weak with relief. "More importantly," Jackson continued, "we have evidence that he's been deliberately introducing contaminated compounds into drug trials to create side effects that would justify higher insurance payouts." Damien's eyes met Victoria's across the desk. "Including the heart medication trials?" "Especially those. The drug your mother needs, Miss Stone, it's completely safe in its pure form. Reed's people have been adding compounds that cause liver damage to make it seem dangerous so they could justify the delays and inflate development costs." Victoria sank into a chair. As the full scope of Marcus Reed's manipulation became clear, he hadn't just been threatening her mother's life. He'd been actively sabotaging the treatment that could save her. "There's one more thing," Jackson said, his voice carrying a weight that made both of them lean closer to the phone. "Reed knows the recording device was destroyed. His people were monitoring the frequency. He's on his way up to your office right now. He's not coming alone." The elevator chimed in the distance, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps in the reception area. Grace's voice, sharp with fear, protesting that Mr. Cross was in an important meeting. Damien moved with liquid precision, pulling Victoria behind his desk and pressing a hidden button that locked down the office's security system. Steel shutters slid down over the windows as reinforced barriers sealed the doors. "There's an exit through the private elevator behind the bookshelf," he said quietly, pulling her toward the far wall. "It leads directly to the parking garage. Jackson has a car waiting. What about you?" "I'm going to finish this." Victoria grabbed his arm as the sound of men shouting and something heavy hitting the office doors echoed through the room. "Damien, don't be stupid. We can both leave. We can both survive this." He covered her hand with his. The first time he had willingly touched another person in 15 years. "Not if we want to stop him from doing this to other people. Reed has to be taken down tonight, and it has to be done right." The office doors exploded inward as Marcus Reed and 4 armed men burst through the security barriers like they were made of paper. Well, Marcus's voice carried across the room like poisoned honey. "The lovers have barricaded themselves in their tower. How romantic." Damien stepped forward, placing himself between Victoria and the armed men. "This is between us, Marcus. Let her go." "I don't think so." Marcus gestured to his men who spread out to surround them. "Miss Stone has become quite valuable, not just as leverage against you, but as someone who knows far too much about our operation. She doesn't know anything that matters. She knows you've been sabotaging our drug trials. She knows about the offshore accounts. And most importantly, she knows that you're willing to die to protect her. Marcus smiled like a shark scenting blood, which makes her the perfect weapon to use against you. One of the armed men moved closer to Victoria, reaching for her arm. Damien's reaction was instantaneous and brutal. He moved like violence given human form, arming the man and breaking his wrist in one fluid motion before anyone could react. "Don't touch her," Marcus laughed, a sound like breaking glass in winter wind. "Still can't bear to see a woman hurt, can you? Even after what Alina did to you." The name hit Damien like a physical blow, and Victoria saw him falter for just a moment. It was enough. Marcus nodded to his remaining men, who raised their weapons with professional efficiency. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus said conversationally, as if discussing stock prices instead of murder. "You're going to transfer control of Cross Industries to my shell companies. You're going to confess to the pharmaceutical sabotage. And then you're going to jump from this window, because the guilt over what you've done has finally driven you to suicide in Victoria. Miss Stone is going to watch you die, and then she's going to disappear. Permanently." Victoria felt the world crystallize around her with diamond-sharp clarity. Everything that had brought them to this moment, every lie and betrayal and moment of truth, had been leading to this choice. This moment, when love would either save them or destroy them both. She looked at Damien, standing between her and certain death, and made a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff into sunlight. "There's one thing you don't know, Marcus." He turned toward her with predatory interest. "What's that, sweetheart?" Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out a second recording device. This one's sleek and modern and still very much intact. "I've been working with Jackson for 3 weeks. Everything you've said tonight, every threat, every confession about bribing officials and ordering murders, it's all been broadcast live to the FBI task force waiting in the lobby." Marcus's face went white, then purple with rage. "You lying bitch. The device I broke was a decoy. This one," she held up the real recorder, "has been transmitting everything to a dozen law enforcement agencies. Since I walked into your club last night, the sound of tactical teams moving through the outer offices echoed through the broken doorway." Marcus spun toward his men, screaming orders. But it was too late. The FBI flooded the office like a black tide. Weapons drawn, and voices shouting commands that turned chaos into controlled precision. In seconds, Marcus Reed and his men were on the ground in zip-tie cuffs, while agents secured the room with military efficiency. As the dust settled, Victoria found herself pressed against Damien's chest, his arms around her like steel bands that trembled with barely controlled emotion. "How long?" His voice was rough against her ear. "How long have you been working with Jackson?" "Since the second day. He approached me after you told me about your past with Alina. He needed someone close to you who could get access to Reed's inner circle." Damien pulled back to look at her, his eyes wide with something between awe and terror. "You've been playing both of us from the beginning. I've been trying to save both of us from the beginning." Victoria reached up to touch his face, feeling him flinch slightly before relaxing into her touch. "Everything I said about falling in love with you was real. Everything I did to protect you was real. The rest was just acting and your mother." Victoria's smile was soft as morning light. "Is going to receive the pure version of that heart medication starting tomorrow? Jackson made sure of that weeks ago." Damien stared at her like she was something miraculous and impossible. "You sacrificed everything to save me. Your safety, your mother's treatment, everything you cared about. Why?" "Because you taught me something I'd never learned before." Victoria stood on her toes to bring her lips close to his. "You taught me what it looks like when someone chooses love over survival, and what does it look like? Like this." She kissed him then, soft and gentle, and full of promises that tasted like tomorrow. For a moment, Damien tensed against her touch. Then something inside him broke open like spring ice, and he kissed her back with 15 years of loneliness and love and desperate hope. When they finally broke apart, Manhattan glittered beyond the shattered windows like a city made of stars. "So what happens now?" Victoria asked, watching FBI agents escort Marcus Reed, toward a future that would be measured in decades behind bars. Damien's arms tightened around her as sirens wailed in the distance, and the first rays of dawn painted the sky gold and pink. Now we save as many lives as we can. Now we build something better than what came before. Now we learn what it means to touch each other without fear. And us. He looked down at her with eyes that held no more ice, only warmth and wonder, and the kind of love that rewrites the rules of what's possible. Now we find out what happens when two broken people decide to heal each other instead of hiding from the world. Victoria smiled against his lips as he kissed her again, gentler this time, like a man learning that some things were worth the risk of being touched. Outside, the city woke to a new day, unaware that in a glass tower high above the streets, two people had just discovered that love was stronger than fear, that truth was more powerful than lies, and that sometimes the best way to save yourself was to choose to save someone else instead. The end.